What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JAR. JAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. It's our weekly show where we go over the magic stories as they're posted on Wizards' website. We also did some magic podcast reviews previously, story podcasts, but we are finally here for, after all those podcasts, for the first story of Ixalan, or from Ixalan.
Yay, it's finally here.
Correct. And so this week in particular, we have the story Jace Alone, which is given the byline of the R&D narrative team. We had that discussion last week. If you missed last week's video, I'm sure it'll pop up at the end of the video for you. You can go check that out. And we get very in-depth in that, so I'm in no way going to talk about it here.
Good.
Because we talked about it enough and had some feedback as well, so we appreciate that. This week we're talking about Jace Alone, as I said. My quick review at the beginning is kind of what it is every time we start a new set. This is the first story of the new set. I liked this story, but in general, if you're here, you probably care about the stories and you care about Ixalan, and so if that's the case, you need to go read this one. It's a continuation of the Gatewatch story, at least Jace's portion, clearly of the Gatewatch story, but it's vital for you to understand what's going on. Reading this one is pretty important, and I don't want to get too much into it because we'll get into it in the full review, but there was a lot here in a good way. So my quick view is go read that story, then come back here. We always say we review, we do not summarize. What about you? What were your thoughts?
I disagree.
Okay.
I think that it should have been a lot more pivotal than I felt it was.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew that Jace's mind had already been wiped. So, yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like this story was very day in the life of Jace doing whatever and getting his ass kicked by being really dumb. Which, you know, for me, is just more of the same. But for most people, it's probably like not their favorite thing. Because a lot of people like Jace. I hate him because I think he's emo and annoying.
We will talk about that. So your quick review then is that they shouldn't read the story?
No, I think they should.
Okay.
But don't get your hopes too high beforehand.
Okay. So we'll get into the full review itself and unpack both of these opinions more, but that's the quick review. If you haven't read the story yet, please go do that and then you can come back here. Now on to the full review itself. I just quickly wanted to talk about a couple of things. So yes, as Amy correctly points out, we are following up the Hour of Devastation story. Jace is an amnesiac, basically. He appears, he doesn't remember his name, he doesn't remember where he came from, who he is, why he's here, where he was, why he has bruises. He doesn't remember that he's a planeswalker. He doesn't even know what planeswalking is. He doesn't remember any of the other members of the Gatewatch, despite seeing them all later on. Well, not all, sorry. But, like, kind of depictions of a lot of them and whatever. You know, he even saw Tamio at one point, a Johnny, etc. So all of those things happened for him, but he doesn't understand, and we're going to talk a lot about that amnesia stuff because there's a lot to talk about.
He's upset about it, I feel like.
There's a lot to talk about. Yeah, but anyway, I want to first highlight what I loved about this story.
Okay, great.
We have talked for a very long time on this show. I mean, you can see what number show this is. We're in like the late 70s at this point of episodes that we've done. Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
I could be wrong. It's right down there. But
it feels like more.
Anyway, but yeah.
It feels like way more.
We've talked a lot, I think so, since Shadows over Innistrad is when we started this show, although we've been reading the stories from before that as well. Whatever. We have talked a lot on this show about Jace. And I have mentioned many times with Jace that I think Jace's biggest issue is he's a mind mage. He is the Mickey Mouse of Magic the Gathering. He is their main character, their poster boy, their poster child. Yet, with these stories, they kind of run into the Superman issue. And the Superman issue is we have created this character that we have made into a godlike figure, or someone who is supposed to be seen as infallible and perfect and amazing and the epitome of what we want people to think is great about the abilities and the things that we put forth in our world. You were going to say something. I
wasn't going to say something. I was just going,
But because he is so powerful, I've been saying since Innistrad, even with Amy and I reading Battle for Zendikar, that there is a need to make Jace less. And I think that the story team has been doing that a lot.
Yes.
Because they don't want Jace to just come out, take over someone's mind, make them kill their friends, or shut their brains down, and then the story's over.
It makes for a very not interesting fight scene, if you will.
Well, like anticlimactic, but also just boring. I mean, it's... And
then it's the same boring story every time.
Yes, I was just going to say, repetitive
Jace
as well.
comes in, controls people's minds, wins because he controls people's minds, the end.
Yes, and so what did they do? We talked about this a lot. They gave him Eldrazi, mindless creatures, controlled solely by the need to feed.
Yes.
Then, when he goes to Innistrad, he goes insane. So his brain isn't working for him anymore. Then he goes to Kaladesh, where, sure, that's an issue, that there are people and he can kind of mind control them, but they're relatively innocent people. They're just working for the consulate.
He doesn't really have people to mind control.
Yes. And then on Amonkhet, he comes across Nicol Bolas, who is much more powerful than he could ever hope to be, and his mind gets wiped and he gets thrown here. Now we are here on Ixalan. And this entire story is Jace being allowed to improve for once in a very long time. He is actually able to improve. He doesn't have to worry about, although it's in there, but he doesn't have to worry about nonsense with Liliana holding him back or his arguments with Gideon. They're there, like I said, those depictions of those people show up, but he doesn't know who they are. So they're not really nagging at him except for that one argument that he has with Gideon, but that argument that he has with Gideon ends with him being like, yes, I can do this, leave me alone, and then he goes and does it. The Liliana illusion even mentions, I'm not so keen on the muscles. Jace is getting strong physically.
She said she liked the muscles, she didn't like his beard.
So he's getting stronger physically. And he even says, I don't know who I am or was, but I wish that I had, at one point he wishes he had control over the sea as opposed to the mind, because it would have been actually more useful to him when he traveled from Useless Island to super croggy bird crap covered island that for some reason was not Useless Island.
Right.
Anyway, where he
more
almost
useless than Useless Island.
Where he almost dies, and yet the other one was useless, where he thrived and learned who he was and gained all these skills, etc. But I loved actually being able to read a Jace-backed story, or a Jace-centered story, where he improved from the beginning of the story to the end of it. And it only took them taking away everything that he was to begin with, right? He could use illusions, but they had nothing to do with his ability to better himself. The only thing that really was left of him was his ability to analyze, think critically. So that portion of his brain was still there. He still took the time to think about stuff and what have you, but he wasn't just, there's someone, mind control. There's someone, illusion. Let's run away and hide and whatever. And I'll sit back and be on the sidelines, telepathically talking to people, telling them what to do. He was actually there, building the raft himself, traveling and traversing and exploring the theme of Ixalan, this island, Useless Island, and saving himself, keeping himself alive with all of these skills and abilities. which, like I said, I loved. I really, really enjoyed that. And that was the story, right? Like, I mean, obviously we won't, but this, I could end the episode right there. That was the story. He improved, and yeah, Veraska was there at the end. Done. There's a lot more to it, and I want to hear Amy's point of view as well, of course. But that's what I took away from this story, was an actual progression for Jace from beginning to end in a positive way. What I know you kind of nodded along with agreement, but what were your thoughts?
I disagree.
Okay.
Here's why.
Okay.
I feel that the story could have done a better job of showing that.
Okay.
Not by the statements that were made, but by conveying emotion that I didn't feel from the story.
Okay.
So when he was in danger, I wanted to feel that fear, and I didn't. I felt apathy. When he accomplished something, I wanted to feel accomplishment. I didn't. I felt apathy. Now, did I feel that way because I don't care for Jace as a character? Or did I feel that way because the story didn't convey enough emotion?
So
Tell me in the comments.
the comparison I'll draw, because it's something that I've thought of, is to the Tom Hanks movie Castaway. Have you seen that movie? Or
No.
Is this okay? Well, I'll talk to all of you then. No, I'll try to describe it a little bit. But it's the concept, similar concept. Tom Hanks in a plane crash. I guess spoilers if you haven't seen this super old movie. Spoilers. But Tom Hanks in a plane crashes. He's alone on a deserted island. And the only things he has are whatever happened to be, I think it was like a FedEx plane or a UPS plane, I think it was FedEx. So whatever happens to be in some of the packages that he commits a felony by opening or whatever, and just himself on this island. And he has similar experiences to what Jace has. He has the moment of, I need to eat, what am I going to do? I need fire because I'm going to die. So what do? And he makes fire. But there's that famous scene that has been turned into a meme, and that scene itself has been played many times over, but it's the scene of Tom Hanks trying to make a fire. And he's doing the things that were described of what Jace was doing, where he's rolling the stick back and forth and he's scraping it over and over, and a little spark lights and a little bit of smoke happens, and he fights to get the ember going, and then the ember dies, and he gets frustrated and he has to do it again. And then the ember finally catches, and he puts more, twine or leaves or whatever on it, and it lights up a little bit more, and then he finally has a roaring fire, and he stands up, and this is Tom Hanks we're referring to here, stands up and he is screaming, laughing, holding the stick in his hands that has, the fire on it with the pieces kind of falling off of it in the middle, and he's screaming about how he has made fire. And so that's what I think of when you say, I wanted more emotion. That's the moment in that movie where you're so happy for Tom Hanks' character, because he did it. He saved his own life. He created fire, and it's that super primitive, like, he even says, I have made fire, right? He's like a caveman at that point, because it's like, it shouldn't be that impressive. If you were in your home, you could just turn on your stove or microwave something or, light a lighter or something like that. But he's in the wilderness. He has nothing with him. And so Jace attempts to do that. And as Amy, I can let Amy talk about this portion of the story, but there was that part where Jace just goes, maybe I can just will the fire to be lit. And then he just does it. And what was your response to that?
My response is, what? Why? How? Explain to me how it makes sense for that thought to pop into his head at that moment.
Unless it was supposed to be desperation. Because he was so desperate that he was like, whatever, I have nothing else left. I might as well just try to will it to happen.
That would make sense, except I didn't feel any desperation.
No, I was going to say, that was not expressed to us. That's just my only guess as to what it could have been, but I agree with you. That part was not properly shown. I'll agree wholeheartedly with that. And except for the fact that he kept saying, the words were there, I need fire, I need it. He's saying to himself, I need the fire, and I'll do anything to get fire. Or later on he says you would do terrible things to get a cup of coffee or something like that. But it's just that idea of they told us he was desperate, but it wasn't felt. And I'll agree that it wasn't felt. And so he shouldn't have been desperate enough.
I feel like there were a lot of statements just one right after the other, and that's all they were, was statements.
Because
I didn't feel like there was true emotion or even really true character development associated with them. And partially I attributed that to the fact that he had lost his memory. If his mind was altered, then maybe he doesn't understand how to feel those emotions, or why feeling them is important, or maybe it doesn't occur to him how much he should appreciate the good things and be fearful in certain situations, but I don't know.
So here's the discussion I wanted to have, and I think going off of that is as good a time to do it as any. I would think, and I feel like this is an issue with a lot of amnesia-based stories, and I will acquiesce to the fact that amnesia is a thing. This is not a sci-fi or a fantasy thing that's been made up. Human beings in the real world can come to from unconsciousness and be missing memories or parts of themselves. That's a thing that can happen to human beings. But we are now in this fantasy world, and I think it is the writer's jobs and the storyteller's jobs to explain their version of amnesia to us, or show amnesia to us, because we've talked about that as well. You show, you don't tell. So I'll change what I said. You should show how your version of amnesia works. And I feel like there were very brief moments where they tried, but my opinion is, and we'll talk about it, that it fell way flat on its face almost immediately, in the fact that I don't think it made any damn sense, the amnesia aspect of this story.
Well, I would say too, I think another element to the fact that I felt that there wasn't enough emotion in this was I wanted to feel devastated. I wanted to be emotionally affected by the fact that Jace, as we knew him, was gone. And that the person we had now was in no way him. And I wanted to, so that it would give what Nicol Bolas did to him more validity.
I will be counter to that only slightly.
Okay.
In saying that Jace, or the Jace that we saw in this story, would not be capable of that. Because you can't mourn the loss of someone you didn't know.
He can't, but we can.
And maybe there's still time for that. Maybe. Maybe there isn't. Maybe this was supposed to be that moment and it fell flat.
Yeah, I just feel that the first story should have been that.
Okay.
The story where we mourn the loss of Jace while he is just unaware of everything around him. And like you said, I feel like there were instances where what you would consider people with amnesia to know made sense, and what you would consider people with amnesia to not know. You know, it's...
As Amy said, I had a big old problem with this, so there's a lot more written about this topic, so...
Well, before you start, I'll say that there were a few spots where I felt like, why would it be this? But I feel like you're really passionate about it, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Sure,
but
sure.
I kind of feel like I disagree with you on that.
I'd love to have that. Sure, let's do it.
So maybe you can convince me by the end, but
I'll sure try.
But I kind of feel like for the most part it was pretty, I don't know, I feel like it pretty much made sense.
What I wrote here basically references the fact that he comes to and he doesn't know his own name. He doesn't know where he was, he doesn't know where he is, he doesn't know any of it, he doesn't even know he can planeswalk. But he starts having the sensation of, oh, I feel a thing, let me kind of fall further into that. And then he starts planeswalking and being pulled away, and then realizes he can't and gets pulled back, and that's a different thing and a different topic for a different time. It's you know, the binding of Ixalan, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in the weeks to come, although that was Story Spotlight number 1, so we already got that today, was the binding of Ixalan. Jace being shown being stuck with the kind of the Halo-y-esque, the triangle in the circle symbol.
The, like, runes or whatever it is.
Hovering over his body, which happened twice, but we only saw it depicted the one time. But so he doesn't know any of those things. But he's able to look at his clothing and analyze what kind of a person would wear his clothing. Why? Why do you know that? You don't know your own name, but you can sit there and say, oh, these clothes would have been worn by this type of person. What?
Well, I'll say that how a lot of people describe amnesia is kind of like, you don't know specifics. So, like, you know what a thing is, but you don't know, like, who people are specifically. Like, you can see a group of people who have similarities and be like, oh, that's what they are or what they do. But you can't, like, identify the people in that group, if that makes sense.
Okay, so, I mean, the other things I wrote down were that he was able to draw the conclusion that it was stupid of him, whoever he was, to have come to this place without proper supplies. But then he could fashion an entire home, as he called it, for himself out of these supplies. So I guess the way I looked at it, and this was why I was branching off of what you were saying earlier to start this topic, was I assume that people who have amnesia fall back to relatively primitive feelings when they are then on their own. I mean, if you have other human beings with you, you can kind of ask them questions and have them tell you things, and that's kind of how you can relearn and or be reminded of what makes sense. But if you are blatantly alone, he even says that he doesn't know that he remembers what another human voice sounds like. That doesn't sound like basic stuff to me.
And that's weird, too, because he's been hearing these illusions talk to him this whole time.
And himself talking.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe the Liliana who was talking to him or the Gideon who was talking to him were only talking in his voice because it's the only one that he can produce or think of. Totally a possibility. We wouldn't know that because it's text-based and they didn't tell us that.
Yeah.
So there's no way to know that. And I assume that those groups out there who recreate these stories in audio form, it will be very interesting what voice they decide to use, because the story says that he doesn't know what they sound like, and yet they are then talking. So, and I'm interested to see whether they use Jace's voice to talk like Liliana, or whether they use Liliana's voice, but I don't know that I'll watch it. It's kind of a professional thing. But regardless, regardless, I'm curious, but I don't know that I'll seek it out. We'll see. And then talks about knowing what allergies are, and he knows enough to put hot coals and root vegetables and fish, bury it underground to cook it properly. that seems like a pretty advanced technique to me.
Yeah.
So to me, they just didn't mesh properly. The I'm an amnesiac, but I have to survive, and so
And
I'm gonna
have no like survival skills, but then I know all these things about how to survive. Yeah.
Plus, I don't know how many days or weeks or months were depicted in this story, although I will say it had to have been many,
Yeah.
because you do not develop visible musculature changes in like a week like that.
Yeah.
Even if you are moving and lifting so desperately. Trust me, ask people who try to work out like that. You don't, in a week of doing intensive workouts, you might change, don't get me wrong, but I don't know that it would be that drastic. I think you need some time.
Yeah, but the other side of that coin is the only person who saw his muscles was a figment of his imagination.
Well, right, so it would be himself.
Right.
And so he's the one referencing it.
So he could be thinking that because he sees his own muscles changing, or he could be thinking that because he realizes that he's doing much more physical labor.
Which he says. He does, mentally says that.
Although he's not actually seeing a physical change in his own muscles.
So,
you know what I mean?
Right. So, and he talks about the albatross. And that's where I think the story team was trying to address the fact that it kind of didn't make sense. Because Jace lays down and sees an albatross flying overhead. And then he says, why do I know what an albatross is?
Yeah, that felt really meta and
Why would
stupid
you?
to me.
That's what I'm saying. That was my thought.
Because if you know what it is, then it wouldn't occur to you that you shouldn't. And if you don't know what it is, then you don't know what it is. So
I genuinely
that line made no sense.
I genuinely think it was the story team trying to say, yes, we understand that not all of this makes sense, and he doesn't get it either.
Right.
But I don't think it hit the mark. I still don't think that it
just felt
excuses all this other
It
stuff.
just felt stupid and annoying because it was like, okay, so you just want us to forgive you for not doing this properly?
Yeah. The other things that I wrote down is he knows what a Leonin is. Because he sees a Johnny and he doesn't know who a Johnny is, but he knows he's a Leonin. Have you seen any other Leonins in your life besides a Johnny? But you know what a Leonin is, but you don't know who a Johnny is?
Again, that's a typical amnesia thing.
Maybe.
I think.
I mean, we don't have other species.
But that's amnesia, too. I mean, I felt like it should have been more devastating than just amnesia. I felt like when his mind got wiped, that it literally got wiped. And he would have to, like if somebody has something very serious, like brain damage happen to them, or, a stroke or something like that, where they literally have to learn how to walk and talk again. They can still think, they still know some things maybe, but they have to basically relearn how to live.
Yeah, but I think at that point you would need other people.
Right.
And
but that was my point. I felt at the end of the last story that that's kind of the state that Jace would be in. And so when I went into this story, I was expecting to be devastated. And it didn't happen because he was just sort of an amnesiac, but not really.
I also have to say it because if I don't, somebody else will, but he's not devastated anymore. Or he's not devastated because now we're on Ixalan. We're out of Hour of Devastation.
Uh-huh.
She's super happy with me now. I'm proud of myself. She's not. Okay, I'm not. Then I'm sorry. If you were thinking it, let us know. Anyway, okay.
Please don't feed it. Please.
I'll enjoy it. So that's these were some of the things that I wanted to mention that, it just didn't track. There were just so many things. And I think that's the part that I had an issue with, clearly, but it took me so out of the story every time because it was like, why does this make sense? Why can he do this? There's such a big deal about the fact that he has amnesia or that he's missing pieces. Did Bolas specifically target the Gatewatch and his mental abilities?
Right.
And so everything else is still there, but he doesn't know who he is, who his friends are, or that he can planeswalk or use illusions or whatever.
It almost seems that way.
That would be, like, I know Bolas is powerful, right? They showed that to us in the last story. They really did. But I feel like that is so above and beyond what they meant to show us. But maybe it is. Maybe Bolas went in and truly picked those specific things and moments.
There definitely wasn't time for that.
Again, we don't know the extent of his power. And I don't know whether that's intentional or not on the part of the story team to have said, like, look, this is what's happening. He is that strong, and he is gonna do this. And this story, the moment where Jace went into his mind and went into that well, and he got to that one part of the well, it was all foggy, and he said, oh, this part is missing. That's the part of his memories that are missing, and so it looks like that well has been corrupted further or deeper in, but to be fair, the only other memories that he really saw were the ones that he had created while on Useless Island. So it really just means everything, or does it just mean that the next layer down, which would be his most recent memories of his activities with the Gatewatch and things like that? I don't know. And I'm sure that those questions will not be answered, despite the fact that now he is on Ixalan, because I don't think Vraska, who is now the character that Jace is with, is going to have that kind of knowledge to impart to him.
Right.
And for him to be able to ask those questions of, and that would probably be the next place to go, would be, oh, another person, let me ask you about my amnesia.
Right.
And so we might have to wait.
Another person who seems to know who I am.
Correct. And we might have to wait until Jace gets his memories back eventually, if he ever even does, before he explains what happened, or we just straight up may never find out. And either way, I mean, we are now on this journey together, and we're gonna figure it out. We'll figure it out just at the same time that you guys do. So I don't know that I have anything more to say for this week.
Meh.
I've
already said it all, I think. It's just...
It was an interesting start, and I don't think interesting in certain people's opinions is a good thing in this case.
I feel
I'm
like there
intrigued.
was a lot of potential for it to have been a lot better than I felt it was.
I'm still intrigued. I'm still, looking forward to the next one to see where they go. I want to see if Jace is going to play into this vampires versus Sun Empire versus merfolk deal going on versus pirates, because he's with the pirates now and he's the castaway in card form. Or will he simply be similar to what the Gatewatch was on Amonkhet, where they are used to introduce us to the world, and then the world gets to play out, the Gatewatch are over here, and we'll come back to them later.
Right.
And maybe it's a little bit of both. We will see how it goes. There's only one Gatewatch member, so there's only so much he can do, but we'll see if he plays a prominent role of being thrust into all of this with Vraska, or if he takes a back seat now that we've seen him, and we kind of get to just develop the world and these characters, and we'll see where we go from there. But this has been another episode of JAR. We are fully into Ixalan now, guys. This is happening. We're a couple weeks away from pre-release. We do pre-release big around here. If you're new to the channel,
yes.
A subscribe button will be appearing here soon. You can click on that, subscribe to the channel. You'll find out when those videos come out. We do tons of pre-release kit openings. Once the full set comes out, we do booster box openings and pack openings. We do drafts and things like that. We have these videos every Thursday, we have product openings every Monday, and we have draft videos every Saturday. So like I said, you can subscribe and you will find out when all those videos come out. There will be playlists popping up covering up my face because you've seen enough of it, and so that's fine, it's enough. And you can click on those to see some of our older videos from Hour of Devastation and things like that. Like I said, this has been another episode of JAR. Thank you for joining us as we showed off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
Always. I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.